George, welcome to the Power Within podcast. It's really lovely to have you here with me today. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah.
Good,
It's
good,
a
good.
nice, warm, sunny day out there. So what's not to love?
Oh, you know what? Like it's yeah, for October, it's wonderful, isn't it? Keep it
Yeah,
going, keep the mood
yeah.
going. I just wanted to kind of like, give some background to the listeners. Like obviously we met in March this year, I think, wasn't it, as
It was,
well?
yeah, yeah,
When I was delivering a workshop for your senior leadership team. And sometimes you sort of like connect with a person or you kind of really take to someone and you made me feel at ease straight away, even though I was really nervous because I was doing your senior leadership team but you were so easy to talk to, like you're such a lovely human. And I thought it'd be really lovely to have you, talk to us about your journey because recently you were diagnosed with ADHD, I think back in November. And it kind of like, you know, although there's been a lot of news, there's a lot of, information about ADHD, I think always digging into someone who's experienced it and like really think about their journey, I think really helps other people as well.
yeah.
So I guess I like to start way back when, um, from the beginning, where thinking about you as a child in school, and I want to kind of know this because I see parents with ADHD children who are going through a bit of a tough time at the moment, to
Yeah.
be fair, and not knowing how to manage it. And also there's waiting lists as well. So how did you feel different as a child? Like did you was because obviously we were both brought up in the 1980s in school. Like
Yeah.
how was it for you?
I think probably a very different experience to school than probably you get these days. It was a great, school was great for lots of different reasons, but not really academically. Because I difficult to concentrate. I found it hard to kind of, unless something actually really interested me and made me feel excited. I wasn't that bothered. Sitting and doing maths, I found that really hard at school, and so that became the thing that actually I really hate. I found a love of numbers, perhaps in the
Mm.
way that I'm through my work that I'm doing now. But certainly at school, it was a lot of that. You know, I suppose stereotyping, kind of like he could do better if he was to
Mm.
focus, if he was to pay attention. There's potential, but that kind of thing, I think, was probably the thing with a lot of my school, and just getting stuff done was a lot of stuff was working the night before or on the way to school,
Yeah.
or in break trying to get something done before you went into the class and got told off. And invariably, there was times when you just didn't do it. So yeah, it was a mixed bag.
Yeah, and I've heard that as well, actually. Like, it's not about being, disobedient or not trying your best. It's just that it takes maybe longer to do or
Yeah,
concentrate as well. And it's really interesting with neurodiversity, isn't it, as well? Like, I really feel like, obviously under that umbrella, there's ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, and I've heard of the other one, dyscalculia, which
right.
is being able to not really about maths and numbers, basically.
Yeah,
I'm sure I've
yeah,
got that. Or I'm just really, really bad at maths, basically.
yeah,
But like and I know that some people, have more than one neurodivergent trait, if that makes sense as well.
yeah.
Um, but did your parents pick up on anything, perhaps when you were kind of going through school, or was it just they thought, oh, we're just being a pain in the ass?
I think my parents were good in that they never really they didn't put pressure on me. They understood that there were certain things that I really liked and enjoyed, and
Mm.
for me going off and playing football, playing cricket were two things that I absolutely adored. Music was a thing for me as well. Art I really got, and anything that was creative. Was good,
Mm.
but it's difficult when you probably don't have the awareness, and especially back in the 70s, 80s. I don't think there was, if you were talking about, attention deficit disorder, it's just like, well, they're just
Mm.
hyperactive kids, and that's just what you do, and just shut up and sit in a corner. Little bit like that across school.
Yeah.
And I think that certainly was difficult. My understanding of ADHD really has only come in the last 3 years, I suppose. To really get into it and understand what it's actually meant to
Yeah.
my life and the way in which I've grown up and way in which I've learned. So yeah, that's been really an interesting journey. I think not just for me, but for my wife as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd love to sort of dig into that, a bit about your wife's experience, especially. But like, like often we bucket, together mental health and neurodiversity. But I think obviously there can be, people who aren't supported, who are neurodivergent, perhaps can, have anxiety or depression and mental health issues as well that develop because no one knows how to cope. They don't know how to cope either, and there's no coping mechanisms there. Did you, as you progress through school and into sort of young adulthood, were you finding things difficult in terms of mental health?
You know what? No, at school. Um, I think during that period, I was just so blissfully kind of like I just get through it. I'm not bothered. And I got to the point, I think, especially when I got to exams, where I was just like, you know what, this isn't. I'm not enjoying this. This isn't something that
Mm,
I'm really getting a huge amount out of. And then I think the probably the biggest hardest thing was actually getting through exams, right? But just in
mm,
the and now I realize how much like that actual ability to get stuff done
mhm.
can be really good because you can be massively hyper focused. But that, if you've got to learn 8 different subjects, means you're hyper focused on a few, and the others just get ignored completely. So
Yeah, and then it's just
now I
upside
understand
down.
that. Yeah,
Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? Like then you're put in school, like you kind of said, all right, you're really good at these subjects, but really rubbish at these. But that
yeah.
isn't necessarily the case, is it? Because you're, like you said, your hyper focus is, was it focusing on things that you found interesting rather than not interesting?
Yes, yeah, it literally was. Something like art, for instance. I yeah, I'm a pretty good artist. I can draw, and I absolutely adored it and loved doing that kind of thing and creative stuff when I was younger. And but it was literally that if something like if there was that thing, then I would get really into it and really focus in on it. And my mum often talks about the fads that I had. So I'd go for a fad. We'd end up with a lot of this stuff that we needed to get so I could do whatever activity or subject or whatever, and then not too long afterwards I'd forget about it, and then I get excited about something else, and then go through all these different things to get excited. Like NFL back in the 80s was something that was massive, so for about 6 months I was really into it, and then I wasn't. And
Did you get the,
got
like, the
all this.
baseball? Did you get the shirts and the football shirts and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that sort of
there was
stuff
a
as
lot of
well?
that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
oh, why did you even bother?
I think I had a Chicago Bulls one, maybe. I don't
Well,
know, like
Bulls, Bears, Chicago Bears was the big
Chicago
one.
Bears. That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
and
I got
yeah,
baseball and football mixed up. But yeah, no, it was a big thing though back in the 80s, no, about having
yeah,
those shirts and stuff. Yeah, no, I
yeah.
can see why. Like, and like, knowing that, of being around, folks who are close to me with ADHD, I can see the obsession that comes for different things, basically,
Yeah,
as well. That focus on those things as well. So it sounds like like you just kind of like it's really nice to hear that you kind of let stuff go at school, like as well, like not too bothered about stuff. But
yeah.
how did it start? How did you start navigating this? And how did it manifest in adulthood and your career, basically? How did you kind of get on with that?
So it wasn't really until the first lockdown and my wife turned around to me whilst we were spending a little bit more time than probably we have ever done. Obviously, we've always worked and kids and everything else that's gone along with it. And she was basically like, "You've got ADHD," and I was like, "No, I haven't." So for probably 3 to 6 months, I was just dodging it and not really paying any attention. And then worked through that a little bit and actually listened to a fantastic podcast with Annie Mack and Toddler T, her husband. And that one really hit home in terms of like, oh, And then I started looking into it. And then you start to realize that there are a lot of coping mechanisms that I've built up. So immediately when I start thinking about that, I go back to my days when I worked at Ashridge Business School, and working with a team and thinking about, having to do admin, which I, hated because I wanted to do all this other stuff. But someone telling me that it wasn't very, the way in which I was doing was rubbish, and I needed to
Mm.
put my ideas up because we were part of a team and we all needed to do it. And so having that and then learning from them, and then I realized that throughout my career, I've found those things, the tools I picked up from other people. I've always called myself a bit of a magpie when it comes to things like that. And I will sit and I will watch someone do something and then I'll repeat it and then I'll take that and make it up my own. And I think that has been the huge thing about me being able to do that. And I think that was also one of the reasons why when lockdown hit, that I kind of went, oh, because there weren't the normal support mechanisms or forms around me, which was work and the
Mm.
being in that. Oh, I need to do this, to do that, to do this. It was just like, what's going on? I've got nothing. I don't have to go and do this, that, and the other. I don't have to be there. I don't have to do that. I'm not in the room with someone. So yeah, that really kind of like threw me completely.
Yeah, and so it's interesting you were saying that, picking up, is it masking when you, or is it
Yeah,
like, it's masking, isn't it, as well? I've
yeah,
had, for me, like when I speak to women, particularly ADHD, there's that masking there, but I think it happens with everyone,
yeah.
as well. So interestingly, like, so you would see people's behaviors to see how
hmm
they were acting. What situations would you try to sort of mask, do you feel?
So I think just that thing about being professional, and
Mm.
having to fit in, especially early career, during the end of the 90s, early 2000s, when I was just getting going, that trying to find people and watch what they did because I wanted to fit in, obviously, and you fit in during school because or college or whatever you're doing because you can just kind of you've been brought up doing that. And when you get into work, you have to change the way you actually do things. And so it was literally just following people, seeing ideas that someone had had, or, that one of the first jobs was working in a bar and just having to order like beer and all those kind of bits. And someone would go through it with you. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's not too hard. I can get that. And then so that's kind of probably my earliest real memory of copying someone and then adapting it. You bring that
Wow.
into who you are. And there was a lecturer at Ashridge that I was talking to, and he was sort of saying, like he'd spoken to someone who'd been at Ashridge 25 years previous doing a course and had come back to do another one, and asked him, well, what can you remember about the course? And he was like, I can't remember anything about the course, but I remember it was great people, great beer, and great food. And that's a similar experience for me. I can't really like until I look back and think about it, I don't really see what I did and why I did it. But I know that now I'm all of that stuff that he learned then, had
Mm.
integrated into who he was and how he worked, and I've done exactly
Mm.
that. And I see it more and more as I get more my head around what ADHD is.
Yeah, do you still do that, do you feel? Or do
Yes,
less of it?
yeah,
Yeah.
I still do it. And I think but I am more comfortable with who I am, and certainly where I am, and have been probably for the last 4 or 5 years. Actually, probably back to 2016 when I was working at Surfdome, or started working there. I was probably still, trying to be corporate, and Surfdome was like, people who are into surfing, skating, snowboarding.
Yeah.
And there was no, or there wasn't the same kind of environment, the same corporate environment I've been in a lot. And so that really changed my view and the way I was like, well, actually, I'm seeing like the global head of marketing, and he's just fidgety and he's all over the place. And we're in this, interview with people, and he was being authentically himself. And so it kind of that helped me become a lot more, this is me. I can't, I'm not going to mask as much. And I talk about it a little bit more than I used to. I've also gone probably too far and then come back again. But yeah, it's that now that I feel like a lot more comfortable in my skin.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, isn't it, as well? Like, I think it's just unfortunate, we've had, society, you know, teach us a certain way in schools and work, we have to work in certain ways as well. And I don't think,
Mm.
I get really confused why we haven't treated people as unique, if that makes sense, because everyone's unique, aren't they, as well? But I wonder whether it's because there's just no resource, especially in schools, to treat kids
Yeah,
as unique,
yeah,
or have attention, like
yeah.
obviously, it's, I mean, gosh, the world is upside down, really, when it comes to, obviously education and being able to like help the kids through and, teach them about emotions and emotional intelligence and get them through
Mm.
like other ways. Um, but like it's lovely to hear that you were able to be more of an authentic self because of that work environment. And what
Yeah.
was it about that work environment then? Was it because the CEO is modeling like it's okay to be yourself?
Uh, more I had a managing director, an amazing fella called John Lane, who was very much he was great. I certainly felt like he was brilliant at empowering me and just going, this is what we need. Let's have a conversation about it. You understand it, I understand it. Let's get it done. And there wasn't like we have to do it in this form or in that form, in this form. And there was a lot less structure around it, but there was still a lot of direction and a lot of context, which I kind of quote a lot now is I need context. Don't necessarily need a box to operate around in it or operate in, but I definitely need some context to understand what it is I'm doing. So that has helped as well with the way in which I, move now through my work life.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think that, it does take time because when you're
Yeah,
younger, you inevitably, want to act in a certain way. You want to belong to society. You want to belong to a group. Like we're
yeah,
social beings, right? And you don't want to get rejected from it either.
yeah.
So it kind of makes sense, as you navigate through your 20s and 30s that you kind of do that. But it's really wonderful to hear, that you've had the opportunity to kind of like be yourself, I think, as well. Um, but in terms of like, we talked about, your wife mentioning perhaps, when you were in a lockdown, that she thought that ADHD could be a thing for you. What was she noticing as your partner, as your wife, you know, the traits, I suppose, that she was seeing that made her say that?
And that's quite a difficult one. I don't think she's ever really explained that to me. Um,
You should ask
but
her.
yeah, I think I might well do. I think more than anything else, I think it's probably she had become aware of it, and then being around me in the way in which I am in terms of procrastination, or having big ideas, and then not always, especially at home, not always finishing them off. Because they turn out to be a bit tougher than you kind of think. Oh yeah, I'll decorate this room or I'll build that wall, and then you just get halfway through and you're like, oh, this is really hard, and
Oh.
I've found something else over there that's really a lot more interesting. So then, yeah, I think so. There's probably that is a significant amount of understanding of where that came from. And she turned around to me, and the good thing was in discovering that podcast and her being able to understand it a little bit more. And it's amazing, for me, I feel very grateful that she went away and looked and did a lot of reading and understanding of what ADHD does to a person, if you like, or what it
Mm,
means for an ADHD person. And in that, we got to a much better place,
mm.
and I think really helped our relationship. And she was just turned around and went, "You're not just a fucking lazy git anymore, are you?" So it was like, that kind of thing.
And this, what, I spoke about this yesterday. I had LinkedIn Live with a lady called Tessa who recently got diagnosed with ADHD in adulthood. And I think what she was saying was that her partner now shows more empathy as
Mm,
well,
yeah,
like to know
yeah,
that you aren't lazy, you're not being disorganized on purpose. It just can't help it
yeah,
sometimes, and showing love more than like showing, like just, oh, for fuck's sake, like what,
yeah.
that sort of thing does
That
change. It's
conversation,
powerful, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah, it's really
that
powerful.
we talk about like parent, adult, child ego states, and although my wife's not a psychologist, but she would now talks to me on an adult level,
Mm,
when there's stuff that's frustrating, rather than immediately, like, because we always do, and I do it with lots of other people as well, is you get to that state where you're kind of like, oh, I just need you to do this, I'm going to tell you, and
mm.
actually it really doesn't help in any way, shape, or form. So being able to act and be on that same level, and is the best way to get anything done with me sometimes.
It's good advice. And now, next
Yeah.
time I work with you, but did it also like affect your parental style though as well with your
Yeah,
children?
I've been thinking about that. So
Mm,
yeah, I think it did, but I think it's interesting as well, and that the way in which you do that, you're still, you still follow some of the things that your parents do, even though you know differently, right? You think you know better, and you still fall into a lot of different traps. And parenting is not easy, but I think the ADHD, or the way in which it affects me, is, I hope, has been really a lot more freedom for my kids, and a lot more um, like creativity,
amazing.
probably a lot more kind
Beautiful.
of empathy, and around that, that emotional support. That's like you said about me
Mm,
making able to make you feel comfortable when you came into the
mm,
meeting with us and the exec team. That ability, I think, is something that I you can't underestimate, and I think,
mm,
having that ability with your children is, well, certainly for me as a parent, is, I think, one of the things. There's still, still frustrations, and you still kind of, as well, there are certain things that you want done a certain way, and it's
mm.
only now that I'm realizing that actually, they're their own people, and they're not going to do it the same way as I do it. So you can't get
Absolutely.
frustrated. You got to let them do it.
Yeah, no, no, you're so right, and that's almost like and this is probably a massive generalization from my part, but everyone that I've met who's got ADHD are really lovely, they're really lovely human beings, really make you feel welcome, warm,
Yeah,
friendly, outgoing, fun, like everything. But I know also that once that fun's done, they take time to recover from that fun too.
yeah.
But yeah, it's do you feel like now, I mean, if we go back to like, you've been diagnosed with ADHD, like obviously there's a couple of types, isn't there, as well? Like, were you told what particular type of ADHD you have?
So mine is the inattentive, kind of more leaning towards that than the other stuff, or the other, like, two. But I think there is, again, it's just you're on this scale. So sometimes I can be very, um, I have that hyper stuff, and I'll be all over the place, or I can be very focused, and it really is. Um, you can go all over the place, and it's just finding that thing, where you are more often than not. And I think more the older I've got, I probably fit into this space a little bit more. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, it's an amazing thing. When I was doing my master's level, like, organizational development program that I did, one of the things, when I was actually writing out my final piece of work, I went and sat in a very noisy cafe early in the morning. I had like the Murder Capital album on almost full blast, was able to work no problem whatsoever, full concentration on what I was actually writing and getting things done. So it's an amazing thing, like when you realize that that's my, one of them, the superpowers I've heard it described as in the past. You can see that, but there is always, like, the thing for me is that, I probably go a little bit too fast sometimes, and then I crash. And so I
mm.
have that thing
Burnout.
where I'm very tired,
Yeah,
and I just
yeah.
have to stop doing anything, and can't think. And yeah, that's the negative part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very true. And I know that, obviously there's various options to manage ADHD. There's like therapy, there's coaching, there's, sort of medicines as well to help you through it. If you don't mind me asking, what have you chosen to kind of, manage your ADHD, or have you chosen anything to manage your ADHD?
I think, being a coach, I, I think that's the way in which I was schooled as a coach was a lot about self-reflection, and being conscious of, where you are and who you are. So I think there's been a lot more self-reflection over the last probably 3 years than I've
Mm.
done for, since I qualified for, back in 2003. And I think, that's really helped. I have gone through the process of titration, so I'm on some one pill, which is like 18 milligrams. I can't remember the name of it. Typical ADHD. Um, but during that process, it actually quite there was a lot of instability because of the effect that it had on me. So I
Mm.
went from 1 to 2 pills to 3 pills and felt very shaky. A lot of palpitations, high heartbeat, um, um, and really felt uncomfortable. And had to kind of come off, try again, and then go back down again. And I've settled on one now, and
Good.
that has really kind of helped me focus a lot more. So during the
Okay.
day, that really does like quieten down my head a little.
Lovely. And so does that mean also that you're able to follow things through a bit more? So all the ideas that you have, are you able to like prioritize and then follow them through and finish stuff off?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, I know also that my energy in the morning is a lot more there and good to go. So I know that if I've got tough tasks to do, that actually now I've got a bit more support, in terms of the medication, and I take it at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and then it kind of wears off through the day. So the morning is a really good productive time for me, and when I work
Mm.
from home, I keep that as focus time. I make sure then I've got the tough tasks that I need to get done, and I will, schedule it. I'm getting a lot better at scheduling things now in the last few months. Also helped by an amazing boss as well, who's really great at adapting to me and the way in which I work as well. But also then, helping me to see different ways of getting or improving the way that I communicate or achieve things as well, which has been brilliant. And I think that for me is the other thing as well. I I try to be as curious as possible, and I also, I have that a mindset of being a beginner. Whenever I go into something, I've got to learn. We've just done. I've just trained as a mental health first aider, which was
Amazing.
something that the AEI Music is, has just done. We've put a few people through it. We're then also going to be training about 100 people next year as mental
Wow.
health first aiders across our community. Um, and in doing that, it also reminds you of looking after yourself before just as much as it is important as looking after others. And I think again that generosity that comes from being someone with ADHD can sometimes be you forget to look after yourself as well. So things like eating is something that I sometimes forget.
Yeah, and I think that self-care is so important as well, isn't it? Really, like you say, you put on your oxygen mask first before anyone else's, and because you have to be good. Like if you want to take care of other people, you have to take care of yourself. And
Yeah,
obviously, like the work you're in, like you're head of people and culture at AEI Group, and so you are, and a coach. So you are concerned that your main concern is the people of
yeah,
the
yeah,
company, and
very
that
much so.
as well. So this is your role, 100%, and what are what are AEI Group doing in terms of being able to help people with neurodivergent traits?
So we have we're doing a lot of work around our social responsibility,
Mm.
and that includes DEI, and also we're a B Corp business as well. Second music company in the world, I think, to become
Wow, that's
become a
amazing.
B Corp.
Yeah, congratulations.
Um,
That's cool.
yeah, so that was before I started, and now I've just got to make sure we maintain it. But we also have done plenty of work on the different needs of the business. So we have ERGs, which have been set up as part of our DAI strategy, and one of those is neurodivergent. So there's myself and a couple of other people who are in that group, and we talk about what's important to us, how we deal with work, and obviously being someone in my position, and maybe we've got younger members of the team. It's also about sharing some advice, but also like yeah, I'm a bit older, but I'm still learning, and it's amazing who can give you like little nuggets of things that you can just pick up. Keep being that magpie and keep finding new ways of working.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know what, I think those ERGs are really important because unless you have those, there's no sort of safe space to
Yeah,
start talking about, your feelings and how you're doing and like with other people, because ultimately people might even, just not even know what they're feeling or how to even explain it or articulate it or
yeah,
talk to someone about it. But if there was like a group there that thought, actually, do you know what, maybe I might not be diagnosed with anything, but I feel like something is there and I'd love to talk to someone
yeah.
about it. I think just having that group there is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I think, myself and a couple of other people have been quite open about we're part of the group. So
Mm,
having that visibility, and being able to say, to others, if you've got any questions, if you want to have a conversation, then we're here. And through my work as well, whilst I'm doing, reviews or coaching people or just having, taking people out for coffee or lunch, which is a great part of my job as well. You start to have those conversations, and people go, "Oh, you mentioned this the other day," and I feel like I do that as well. And so then it starts to
mm.
open up different avenues and different conversations, and then you can start helping people. And I know that that's happening across various different avenues that we've got through the
That's
business.
wonderful. It is wonderful, and I think people are trying hard to kind of like implement awareness, I suppose, as well. And I know that this October actually is ADHD Awareness Month, and
Yeah.
yesterday was Global Mental Health Day as well. What do you feel like? When you were like working, in different companies, obviously AEI Group, you're doing what you can to kind of like really help your staff. What do you think companies can do? How can they first start? Like, what if they haven't done anything? What can they first do? Do you think to kind of like really incorporate that into their business and support people?
I think one of the real key things is just to understand that you've already got people who are neurodivergent in your workforce. So, they're there. We are here. We're not going anywhere. But I think it's that thing of actually realizing that those people are really important and that how much they actually bring to your business. You know,
Mm,
being autistic isn't a terrible thing. It's an amazing thing, and I've seen it work with various different people that I've worked with. But being able to say, look, we want to create a space that everyone can feel okay, that everyone can feel safe, and that people can turn up to work and not have to worry about that. And I think we are here is certainly. We're doing all right. We're getting there. It's a continuing story. We can't ever take our foot off the brake, off the pedal with that one. We've got to keep making sure that we're doing the right thing. But I think people just need to be, it feels like people can come and be themselves, and you only get that really through the people that work for you. We can
indeed.
do some amazing stuff in terms of employer branding. Put some amazing videos out, but really the proof in the pudding is that the people we work or that will work for us or work with us um, are able to feel and act and be themselves and use some of that stuff. And then it is about making sure that especially your leadership team are aware
Mhm.
about what ADHD or whatever neurodivergence it might be, or that there is there is a bunch of people who think differently, and that's going to bring an amazing experience for other people in the business and for those people who think differently. So
Yeah.
what is that going to bring, and how much value can you get out of that? Not just simply how do we, put stuff in place to minimize any damage. It's like how do we
Mm.
actually really get the best out of these anyone that comes in and says that they've got a that they're neurodiverse. Excuse me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's a beautiful thing. It should be celebrated that everyone thinks differently and everyone is different. And I think maybe, looking back at, stuff that I've done, the training that I've done, there's definitely been missing, like the EDI training,
Mm,
certainly neurodiversity should be part of that, and it hasn't been
yeah.
necessarily because the knowledge wasn't there, I think, as well. And I think, could it be could it be part of the EDI stuff, do you think, or training or awareness?
Yeah, most definitely. It has to be.
Mm.
Just as every, again, going back to the thing you said earlier on, we have to stop thinking that we're all the same,
Yeah.
and that we have to start realizing that there are certain people who think and act differently, who have different backgrounds, who come from different places. I always talk about, me as a human. I carry a huge map of the world, and that is the experience that I've had the whole journey from when I can first remember all the way to where I am now. And
Mm.
that is completely different. And we're having this conversation, and you're experiencing it at the same time, but in a very different way, and you're hearing things in a very different way. So I think, if we as leaders within a business can remember that and be as flexible and agile with the way in which we interact with people, we get to know them as well. I think, that's
Absolutely.
something that is something that historically is like, you come into work and you've got your work friends, but people or colleagues, they come in, they work with you, but actually, as a leader, you need to understand who they are and what makes them tick and how you get the best out of them.
Yeah.
And you can't do that by treating every single one of them the same. So you've got to do a
No,
lot of work
no.
on
And
yourself
yeah,
for that.
you do. And I think that also goes way back to school as well, doesn't it? Education. And also parenting as well,
Yeah,
being aware that if you have like, your child might not be the same as your other children, for example,
yeah,
and why they sort of behaving a different way as well. And I think it's just that awareness, isn't it, as well? Like if we
yeah,
bring that awareness, that self-awareness in about how you're feeling, but also how to treat others as well, I think, like life will be a lot better and
most definitely.
happier for people as well. Because mental health generally is declining, right? It doesn't feel like it's getting any better, but I think it's because we have lack of resources, and we don't have the ability to like give as much as we can. But I think if you start in the workplace, if you start with leaders, if you start with the training and make you spend most of your time at work, right? So that's a
Yeah,
great place to start, isn't it, really? And make sure it's done properly. I think
yeah, yeah,
make sure
very
you
much so.
implement the training properly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Ken Robinson talked about the education system and its many failings, but also some of the amazing stuff that they do that it does. But it is about doing it one way, and that simply isn't going to keep cutting it. We have to think individually about those young people who are going through the education system and how we get to them in order to keep them engaged with schoolwork, to not necessarily push them down the academic route, because not everyone is that way. I wouldn't have gone down the route. I would have dropped maths as early as I possibly could, perhaps to
Yeah.
my detriment. But having other avenues and other ways of focusing, he talks about, knocking the creativity out of people, so you think all
Mm.
the same way. And I think that's where we're missing a massive trick. And I certainly think now, with my experience over probably, since 2013, 14, going into a few different places over my career since then, I've seen businesses have changed. And the way in which we have worked with people and brought people in to work with us, we're looking at the impact that they can have. We're asking them to adopt behaviors, or to think about their behaviors, and what that means and how that ties in with who we are and the purpose of the business. And that's not the same as just do the task, get it done. We don't want people, like, talk about training, like training's great, but training gets, if you boil it down, perhaps my way of thinking is, if you train someone to do something, they do it one way. Whereas if
Hmm.
you help that person understand why you're doing it, they will do it, and they will do it probably better than
No
you can
way.
do, and then
Exactly.
build
So
on that.
true. Hallelujah to that, George. Hallelujah to that. I love that. It feels like let's do this work, man. There's so much work to be done, isn't there? Really, have
Yeah,
these amazing, beautiful conversations, and you realize, oh, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done.
yeah.
And I love your passion about this, and I love the work that you do as well with AEI. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you about the work that you're doing, about your experiences with ADHD, how could they get in touch with you?
Oh, well, hit me up on LinkedIn, George Horn. Fairly simple, uh, defined on there. I, d- how else? Do you want like email or like
Oh no, that's great.
WhatsApp?
Yeah, LinkedIn is
LinkedIn.
perfect. I think it's a great way to go. And I think also, I really think that other businesses should share what they're doing with each other, as well, because I think that helps growth too, basically. So I encourage any of you listening to kind of like see what George is doing at AEI Music Group to kind of really reach out to him as well and think about how you can help your staff and employees and kind of bring out the best of them, really, to be fair. And I love that you're doing
Yeah,
all the mental, first aid stuff, mental first aid stuff as well. I think it's incredible to kind of do that for the community. Really
yeah.
good.
But as we are trying, like AI music, one of the reasons why I'm here is that there's a big goal which is to change the music industry and to make it, and especially within the electronic music, is to help bring in new people that are going to experience it and that can actually add value and drive this forward and change it, because it's not that everything changes and you need fresh blood and fresh ideas and people who come from a different angle in order to make that work and work differently or work better. And so it's that for us is really important. So we do, as a business, we have our own businesses, but we also work as part, we call what we call our community and ventures, and we have businesses that we also invest in, and we work with them. And my role is to also kind of talk to them about the way in which they look after their people, or the way they recruit, or the way that they interact with across the business as well. And we want to keep that moving. When we
Yeah.
did the first aid training last week, we also brought in another company that we work closely with, and they came and joined the session that we held with an amazing business called Corin and Co, who ran that session for us. And that having two different businesses in the same space really
Mm,
changed the dynamic of
absolutely.
what we were talking about, and brought in some fresh ideas that not just simply about us as a business and how we operate, but how other businesses also do things and can operate.
Absolutely. That diverse thinking is so important. I love that you're
Yeah,
doing that as well. You're doing such wonderful work, and I really appreciate you talking through that and your experience and your journey as well of
thank you.
ADHD. Thank you so much for being on the Power Within Your podcast, George. I've thoroughly, as always, enjoyed my conversation with you.
Appreciate it.
And,
Thank you.
thank you for sharing that. And I think it'd be very valuable. So that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.